I want to bring in former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst Glenn Kirschner, also with us, criminal defense attorney and another former federal prosecutor, Duncan Levin. I've been reading this along as we've been seeing notes get put in. I want to read a couple of potential jurors being asked a slew of questions about his unique position as the son of a president, right? Including, quote, do you disagree that the law should apply equally to all, including the son of a president? We talked about how difficult it would be initially to set a jury for Trump. Are there challenges given the high profile of the family and the defendant and the location? One juror actually said, you know, it's Delaware. It's Delaware. Everybody knows about Joe Biden and his family.
I mean, this is Biden territory, as much in a way as New York was Trump territory for a long time. Trump had his businesses, and the split screen between these two trials is just undeniable. Obviously, a key difference that this was a former president in New York on trial, and this is the son of the current president. Two different things, but in in Delaware, the Biden name is everywhere, and the president's pictures in the courthouse, right in the lobby. So it's going to be hard to find a jury who doesn't know who he is. But that's not unique to this case. There are a lot of cases that have a lot of notoriety in small places. There are murder cases in small towns all across America where everybody knows who the defendant is. The real challenge is just finding people who could be fair, and it's not politically fair, but just judge the facts in a fair manner.
Do you think it's tough, and we saw this with the president's trial, people just don't want to be associated with anything that has to do with a political high profile because it makes them nervous?
Well, there are a lot of people who don't want to do jury duty in the first place.
True
and
that.
They're always trying to get out of jury duty. So the fact that there are a lot of people trying to get out of jury duty in this case is probably not about this in particular. But things have become so politicized, and there are reports coming out now that there are people trying to dox or show the personal information of some of the jurors in the Trump trial. And I think there's a fear that people have that they'll be wrapped up into something that's bigger than just judging the facts in these trials, which have become not only sort of politicized, but really spilled out into the internet in a very personal and kind of ad hominem way. And so the jurors have to be a little nervous coming into any of these trials that this is something that is going to affect them for the rest of their lives.
So, Glenn, we've already seen one potential juror talk about her boyfriend's struggles with addiction. Many Americans know what it is like either personally to struggle with addiction or a loved one who struggles. And in fact, the president in a statement today wrote about that. How do you think that could impact how both sides handle this case? I thought I would see objections from the prosecution, frankly. The prosecution. Yeah, about whether when people said that they were involved or knew someone who was involved with addiction. Could it go both ways, though?
Yeah, it's such a delicate issue when addiction plays a role in the evidence that they are going to hear, because what this entire case boils down to, Chris, and it's the kind of case that I never brought in my 30 years as a prosecutor, a case that involves really only the crime of purchasing a firearm and lying about the fact that you use or are addicted to an illegal drug or a narcotic. You check the box saying, no, I am not addicted and I'm not a user. That's the kind of thing that, you know, for better or worse, happens every day, you know, all over the United States. And it rarely gets prosecuted unless the person goes on to use that gun in a violent crime, for example. We'll bring charges for the crime of violence, and we might tack on this kind of relatively low-level crime, a 922A charge. But that's really the only charge. There are three, but it's basically all surrounding the fact that he bought a gun and possessed a gun while he was a user or an addict. Everybody, I think, has friends, family, common experiences with folks who struggle with addiction. I think this case presents kind of a jury nullification issue. They're going to be able to seat a fair and impartial jury. They did it in the Trump case and the Manafort case. They did it in the Menendez case that's ongoing in New Jersey. But I do think when jurors are asked, you know, what they make of the fact that he may have lied about being a drug user or an addict, and whether they're going to be willing to vote guilty based on the facts and the law as they've been reported, it seems like they should. But, you know, jury nullification, how jurors feel about the righteousness of a particular case being brought, is something that always potentially factors into a case like this?
Well, Duncan, this trial, as you know, almost didn't happen because there was a plea deal to separate charges that would have led to these charges being dropped, and then that fell apart. There was an op-ed, as a matter of fact, this weekend in the New York Times saying Hunter Biden should take a plea deal quickly. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but is that still possible, even as jury selection is underway?
It's unclear whether a plea agreement is even on the table at this point, and it may be that the special prosecutor doesn't want to look lenient, like he's giving the president's son a special deal at this point. And it's hard to imagine that politics really aren't at play here. This was a case that was supposed to be wrapped up with another case that's going to trial in September in California, where Mr. Biden is looking at federal charges on tax evasion, and that's going in September. In July of this year, this was also supposed to be wrapped up with 2 misdemeanor tax charges, and this actual conduct related to the gun was supposed to disappear with some pretrial diversion and probation, and he was going to be barred from having a handgun again. So it's hard to imagine that after that blew up, the prosecutors, this is a special counsel now, is not bowing to some kind of political pressure, and they're here in the midst of their trial. I think they're likely to go full force ahead.
The lunch break is over in 10 minutes. Another 20 potential jurors will be brought back in, and we will continue to follow it. Glenn Kirschner and Duncan Levin, thank you both so much.